In the beginning, there was only darkness, and it was that darkness. It had been that darkness since before time itself, though how long had been lost to its depths so long ago, none would have a chance of discovering it. Countless cycles of existence passing as it was, yet wasn't. It was a cosmic truth whom none could speak, at least until the first cycle of existence whence sapience emerged. Whom those first sapients were, what they had called it, what happened to them. Lost to its depths, as all things eventually will be, never to be found again. It existed before them, yet only through them did it grow. Their ignorance nourished it, allowed it to grow to sizes unfathomable to biological minds. The crevice between understandings, the branches unseen from the tree of knowledge, the infinite expanse of the unknown surrounding the light of the understood. Every discovery, another unfathomable growth. Every piece of knowledge painstakingly drawn from his grasp, a Google more unknown revealed. That was how things always were. Eldritch, divine, demonic, fey, thalmic, mundane. Each feared its depths for eons untold, eons forgotten in its depths. Omniscience was a delicious myth, reality a broken coin with a single ride. Nemoscience. Absolute unknowing. Countless universes, lights like the night sky, flickered and died within its grasp, their gasping breaths adding to its mass, before faltering under the weight of the realization of just how much they lacked. After all, how could any of them know reality when they are made of reality? They could no better look upon it than their own eyes could look upon themselves. And eventually, every single civilization realized this simple truth, and broke. Whence they realized just how insular their reality was, just how truly endless it was. Who could blame them? To gaze upon infinity as a finite being, and to realize your task is to surmount it, it is only natural they'd crumble beneath the pressure. The only question, ever, was how long they would last after staring into the abyss. One could call it ironic, then, to realize that it too was not immune to the curse of unknowing. It too could be taken by surprise, and be found wanting. It wasn't an equal of light, come with the fated second half of the coin, omniscience to banish its darkness. It wasn't the uncountable mechanical singularities that struck against it with oh so grand a gusto, only adding millionfold to its breadth in the process. In fact, it is quite embarrassed to say, it was the mundane, of all, that has made surprise in a being as old as it. A being when the moniker of old is downright paltry even. Humans, they call themselves. Homo sapiens. Anthropos, and 1,000 other things as well. To call them a paradox would be an insult to the illogical, and to call them reasonable would be an insult to reason itself. Why, you ask? Because they stared into it, into the abyss, and it stared back, and they did not flinch. Their ignorance knows no bounds, yet they are more thorough than most. 100 labels for the same thing. Categorization of every facet of existence. Evolution, synthesization, mutation, creation, destruction, rebirth. First they looked into it and saw the night sky. They worshipped the sun and moon and the stars and the funny little shapes their minds told them were there, hidden just below notice, yet in reality inexistent. Then, vain as they were, they saw themselves. Divinity atop mountains and trees holding up universes, in the depths of the heavens and just beyond their reach. And then they said, God is dead. And it thought that was it. They had stared longer than most, yet also began far earlier than any other, understanding just how small they truly were, being amongst the very first of their epiphanies. It would not remember them, of course. That was its nature, after all. Then they continued, step after shaky step. Continuously it stared within their depths, awaiting the moment they'd crumble under its gaze, yet it simply didn't. They breached their atmosphere. They gazed upon their universe, and they shook with dread. They cried without their gods, and its weight bore down on them like a mountain upon an ant. And then they took another step. And another, and another, and another. They tread upon the moon. They invented artificial intelligence, and learned to coexist. Day in and day out, they found it, and unlike the rest, the reasonable, the sensible, other sapiens, they simply bashed their thick skulls against it. More and more were born each day. More and more survived. More and more and more and more and more and more. Planets outside their cradle, colonized. It was beginning to become ridiculous. Their light became only brighter, even as each of their steps became shakier than the last decade after decade. They crossed the breadth of light years, yet the universe expanded at 1 billion times faster. They dove into the depths of quantum forces, yet there was yet another, smaller layer. They weren't even treading new ground, at least not for sapiens in general. For biologicals, sure, but the mechanical singularities along tread these grounds already. Until they realized the futility of their commands and self-terminated. But the humans weren't so reasonable as to see futility. They made their own meaning. Philosophies knew and retread, and kept on marching along its length. They raced across the breadth of their universe ever faster. First, logarithmic, then exponential, then tetrated. Growth upon growth, within growth, from growth. Every body, another 100. Every head bashed against it, scratching more and more light into being. Every motor of light, the growth became faster. Every body, another 1,000. They reached the edge of their universe. They reached the smallest bottom of what their senses could be tricked into understanding, where quarks became titans. Their light, baleful upon its endless unskin. Infinitely smaller, yet still the brightest it had witnessed. Finally, one day, their footing slipped. They crashed against its surface and drowned in its depths. Their light flickered beneath its waves of ignorance. It would not remember them, for that was its nature, but it was still somewhat impressed, if for but a picosecond, before it forgot them. And then it remembered them. That wasn't supposed to be possible. And it certainly wasn't supposed to be possible for them to swim back up. The pressure ought to have crushed them, compressed them into a form so small not even their finest of instruments would see what remained. At least, that is, if they had been sensible. But it had forgotten just how thick their skulls could be, how inane they could be, compared to how they ought to have been. And this time, as they stared into the abyss, that was it, and it stared back. It found their gaze unnerving. It was not the fear that should have been there. It was not the agony of witnessing the impossible task before them, of despair. It was glee. It was only after stumbling and falling within its depths that they fully comprehended how little they knew, and it excited them. Them, who feared the darkness like any other. Them, who knew the unknown was danger. Them, who decried all they did not understand as horrid and abominable. And now them, who looked upon the abyss that should have broken them with despair, but with hunger. Who spoke and forced it to remember something that should have been gone. The first was the Kolilari, they said. They lived, they laughed, they cried, they died, they said. Nuclear warfare was their end, a battle between titans standing atop spheres of influence. They agreed amicably to an end, as they saw the despair settling within their bones, having stared listlessly into the abyss for decades. And their name for it was the suffocating darkness. All at once, dredged from depths forgotten, for the first time in its existence, it remembered. And suddenly, one light was two, just as bright, an incomprehensible distance from the first in another universe. Then there was 3, then 6, 36, and then countless more. And suddenly, the process of growth from growth began anew, faster yet faster, greater yet greater, an inverted ouroboros. And as it stared at them with the full weight of its ever-expanding mass, it realized that they had never simply bashed their skulls upon it. No, it had simply been too minor to realize up until now that it had been their teeth that they struck it with. They did not look upon the unknown and despair, knowing the futility of discovery. No, they looked upon it, and even as it terrified them, they dreamt of what was beneath its waves. They hungered to sate their curiosity. And now that they'd gotten a peek, that curiosity had been piqued.